Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling strangely tired, as if someone just siphoned off your energy, and yet they didn't yell at you, they didn't threaten you, they didn't even seem hostile. In fact, they were probably soft-spoken, maybe even charming. They shared their pain with you, made you feel needed. Maybe they even cried. And you listened, you helped, you gave, you stayed. But now, you're exhausted, confused, worn thin in ways you can't even explain. This is the signature of the unconscious manipulator, a type of person Carl Jung warned us about. Not because they are evil, but because they are unaware of their own inner chaos. You see, Jung spent his life studying the unseen world inside us, the psyche. In his work, The Ego and the Unconscious, he explained that much of our behavior isn't truly ours. We think we're in control, but often we're just puppets of things we refuse to face. Trauma, wounds, complexes, projections. Now imagine someone walking around with an entire psychic basement full of repressed pain. They've never looked inside, never cleaned house, never dared to confront their shadow. What do you think happens to all that unresolved energy? It spills out, not violently, not directly, but silently, dangerously, through projection. Projection is when someone unconsciously takes the things they hate, fear, or deny in themselves and places them onto you. You become the villain in a drama that has nothing to do with you. And the terrifying part, you won't even notice it happening. At first, it looks like compassion. You think they're just in pain, and maybe they are. You tell yourself, they just need someone to talk to. They've been hurt before. I can handle this. But slowly, insidiously, their story becomes yours. Their pain becomes your responsibility. Their mood swings become your problem. Their silence becomes your punishment. Their emotional chaos becomes the background noise of your daily life. And worst of all, you start blaming yourself. You begin to wonder, am I the toxic one? Did I really say something wrong? Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe I owe them more understanding. But here's the truth. You're not the toxic one. You're being used emotionally, energetically, spiritually, as a vessel for someone else's unconscious. And that is what makes the unconscious manipulator so dangerous. Jung said, "What we do not confront in ourselves, we will encounter as fate." And fate, in this case, may look like your partner, your parent, your best friend, your boss. This person doesn't know they're manipulating you. That's what makes it so hard to fight back. There's no obvious villain, no overt abuse, just 1,000 subtle cues. The sighs, the long pauses, the "I guess it's nothing," when clearly something is wrong. The emotional quicksand they silently invite you to drown in. They're not trying to control you. They're trying to survive by offloading their psychic burden onto someone else. And guess who they picked? You. But here's the good news. Once you see the pattern, you're no longer trapped by it. The way out is awareness. You must begin to ask yourself every time you're pulled into someone's storm, is this mine or theirs? Is this emotion genuinely mine, or has it been projected onto me? Am I being a friend, or am I being used as a substitute therapist, parent, or punching bag? Start noticing the signs. You feel heavy after interacting with them. You're constantly second-guessing yourself. You feel responsible for their mood swings. You feel guilty when you try to set boundaries. You feel like no matter how much you give, it's never enough. These are not signs of love. These are the fingerprints of unconscious manipulation. And there's one more thing you must understand. Many unconscious manipulators are incredibly intelligent, emotionally expressive, even deeply creative. They may write poetry, they may volunteer, they may seem wounded but wise, almost spiritual. But don't be fooled by appearances. As Jung warned us, the more intelligent a person is, the more elaborate their defense mechanisms become. And if they haven't done the inner work, their brilliance becomes a weapon, aimed at your mind, not your heart. In the next section, we'll explore an even subtler danger. The bearer of the persona. Someone who doesn't just manipulate emotions, but entire realities. They don't drain your energy with pain. They drown your identity with perfection. If you thought charm was dangerous, wait until you meet the mask. Stay with us. This journey through Jung's psychological shadows has just begun. Not all danger comes wearing sharp teeth. Some danger wears a smile, polished shoes, an impeccable voice, a handshake that feels just right, and an image so perfect, so practiced, that you don't dare question what's beneath it. This is the danger of the persona, the mask we wear to survive in society. And when someone becomes so attached to their mask that they forget who they truly are underneath, you're no longer dealing with a person. You're dealing with a performance. This is the bearer of the persona. The second psychological danger Carl Jung says we must learn to identify and protect ourselves from. In Jungian psychology, the persona isn't inherently bad. It's necessary. It's the face we show the world, our professional identity, our role in society, our sense of social decorum. It's how we survive in schools, jobs, families, and public life. But Jung gave a warning. The persona is what someone is not, but what they and others think they are. In other words, it's an illusion. A necessary one, but an illusion nonetheless. The danger begins when a person believes they are their persona. When the mask fuses with the skin, they no longer play the role of the perfect parent, the model employee, the kind friend. They become it. And everything that's messy, raw, authentic, painful, or real gets locked in the basement of the psyche. Living with someone like this can feel strangely sterile. Everything is fine. Always. They smile. They listen. They say the right thing. But underneath, there's nothing real. The laughter is rehearsed. The kindness is performative. The humility is strategic. And if you ever dare to express something real, a difficult emotion, a vulnerability, a spontaneous reaction, they retreat. Or worse, they shut down the moment like a scene that doesn't belong in their script. You see, the bearer of the persona doesn't just manage their image. They want you to manage yours too. You must fit into their narrative. You must behave, smile, keep the peace. And without realizing it, you start wearing a mask too. Jung wrote, "The stronger the persona, the more impoverished the soul." When you're close to someone who is overly identified with their persona, you begin to feel invisible. Not because they're mean, not because they dismiss you, but because they never really see you. They're relating to the version of you that fits into their controlled, curated world. And if you express something that doesn't align with their ideal, you'll feel subtle rejection, a pause, an awkward shift, a look of discomfort. It's not overt, but it cuts deep. You start thinking, am I too emotional? Too sensitive? Too intense? And so you suppress. You police your truth. You shrink your voice. You become safe, predictable, pleasing, not because they asked you to, but because their persona trained you to. Now here's the twist. The bearer of the persona isn't living a good life. They're not truly confident. They're not at peace. Behind the clean-cut identity is often a soul in quiet agony, because everything they've repressed, their sadness, their desires, their fears, their shame, still lives inside them. It doesn't disappear. It ferments, and eventually it becomes the shadow. And that shadow, if ignored, becomes dangerous. Because what we repress doesn't just vanish. It returns, disguised as anxiety, rage, illness, addiction, depression, or sudden explosions that come out of nowhere. So if you've ever seen someone who is always calm suddenly erupt with violence or venom, you've witnessed the shadow breaking through the mask. Living with the bearer of the persona is like living inside a theater. Everything looks perfect, but there is no intimacy, no real connection. It's a relationship with a role, not a soul. And worst of all, it's contagious. You begin to lose touch with your own spontaneity. You become afraid to make mistakes. You suppress your quirks, your playfulness, your realness, in order to match the image they're projecting. Eventually, you forget who you are, not because they forced you, but because their perfection made your authenticity feel unwelcome. So how do you protect yourself? It starts with recognizing the mask. Ask yourself, does this person allow space for emotional messiness? Can I be vulnerable with them? Do I feel like I have to perform around them? Am I more focused on being perceived well than on being real when I'm with them? If the answer to any of these is yes, you may be caught in the energetic field of a persona bearer. And here's the deeper truth. We all have personas. You do, I do, everyone does. The real danger is identifying with it, forgetting that the mask is just a role, not the full truth. Jung's path of individuation, of becoming whole, requires us to take the mask off, to feel what's underneath, to express what's real, to stop being what others expect, and start becoming who we truly are. Carl Jung warned us that the persona is necessary, but it is not enough. And those who live entirely inside it are not just hiding from others, they are hiding from themselves. And in that hiding, they become dangerous, not through malice, but through emotional unreality. Their illusion begins to infect others, until whole relationships become built on nothing but polite silence. In the next part, we will go even deeper. We'll meet someone who doesn't just hide behind a mask, but someone who buries their emotions so deeply that the shadow takes over. Someone who explodes, not because they are cruel, but because they can no longer contain what they've denied. Join us for part 3. The owner of the repressed shadow. When suppressed darkness strikes back. Because what we push down always comes back up. What happens to the parts of you that you refuse to feel? What happens to the envy you don't admit? The rage you swallow, the lust you shame, the ambition you mask as humility? Do they vanish? Number, they go underground. They become the shadow. And the longer you keep them locked away, the more pressure builds beneath the surface. Until one day, it all breaks loose. Welcome to the world of the owner of the repressed shadow, a person who appears kind, composed, even morally superior. But behind their pristine exterior lies a storm waiting to explode. Carl Jung described the shadow as everything the individual refuses to acknowledge about themselves, yet which insists on being expressed in one way or another. And that one way is often unpredictable, unconscious, and devastating. These are the people who seem too perfect, too in control, too well-mannered. They never raise their voice, never cry in public, always polished, always appropriate, always restrained. But here's the paradox Jung pointed out. The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. The stronger someone clings to the image of being good, spiritual, disciplined, positive, the more they reject and repress the raw, chaotic parts of themselves. They don't just ignore their darkness. They deny it. They don't think of themselves as angry. They say they're just firm. They're not judgmental. They're honest. They're not envious. They're just realistic. But underneath that vocabulary, there's a volcano. Living with this type of person feels like walking through a room full of invisible tripwires. They don't seem volatile, until suddenly they are. A minor disagreement becomes a cold war. A casual mistake becomes a personal betrayal. A simple emotional expression, your pain, your vulnerability, is met with contempt or correction. You're left wondering, what just happened? This is what Jung meant when he said, "What is not brought to consciousness appears in our lives as fate." These people are not responding to you. They are reacting to the suppressed parts of themselves that you happen to trigger. Inside the owner of the repressed shadow is a battlefield. Their conscious mind, the persona, wants to maintain control, order, dignity. But their unconscious is bursting with disowned emotions, bitterness, shame, repressed sexuality, jealousy, trauma. And because they never consciously deal with these forces, they leak. Passive-aggressive comments, subtle cruelty, moral superiority, micromanagement, unexplained explosions. They might even hate people who express traits they've buried. Spontaneous people, vulnerable people, sexual people, emotional people. Why? Because you represent everything they've exiled from their own identity. To be near someone who embodies what they repress is unbearable. If you live or work closely with someone like this, you begin to shrink. You find yourself avoiding topics, suppressing your truth, walking on eggshells, not because they yell, but because their silence is worse, or their smile turns tight. Their tone shifts ever so slightly. Their compliments carry hidden knives. You begin to internalize their repression, and without knowing it, you start to repress yourself. You stop crying, stop laughing loudly, stop showing flaws. You become an edited version of yourself, afraid of waking their shadow. Now let's be clear. Repression is not control. It's not strength. It's not morality. It is fear. Fear of feeling, fear of chaos, fear of not living up to an ideal self-image. But Jung showed us that the path to healing isn't through more suppression. It's through integration. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." In other words, the shadow isn't evil. It's human. And within it lie not just your wounds, but your hidden power. The very things the owner of the repressed shadow is trying to hide. Their anger, their passion, their desires are the very keys to their wholeness. But they must be faced. If you're close to someone like this, ask yourself, do I feel like I'm not allowed to be messy around them? Do they shame or avoid raw emotions, especially mine? Do they erupt without warning, then pretend nothing happened? Do they hide behind morality, routine, or logic to avoid discomfort? If so, you're likely entangled in their psychic repression, and the only way out is truth. You must stop colluding with their illusion. Stop adjusting your behavior to protect their image, and start asking yourself honestly what you have been denying in order to keep the peace, because the truth is, at some point we all become the bearer of the repressed shadow. We've all silenced a scream with a smile. We've all swallowed truth to seem nice. We've all put masks on parts of ourselves we were taught to hate. But awareness is the beginning, and naming the shadow is the first act of freedom. In the next part, we'll meet the moral controller, someone who doesn't just repress their shadow. They project it onto others in the name of ethics, spirituality, and righteousness. They make you feel small, not with violence, but with virtue. If you've ever felt judged by someone who seemed pure, if you've ever been made to feel guilty just for being yourself, then part 4 is for you. We're not done yet. We're only halfway through the unconscious jungle Carl Jung warned us about. Stay awake. Stay with us. There's a particular kind of person that doesn't scream, threaten, or humiliate. They don't raise their hands or even their voices. Instead, they raise the bar on everything. How you eat, how you speak, what you believe, what you wear, how spiritual, pure, or selfless you are. And if you fall short, they don't yell. They simply look disappointed. Welcome to the world of the moral controller. This is the 4th archetype Carl Jung warns us about, the one that hides behind ideals and ethics, while quietly shaping your behavior through guilt, subtle shame, and moral superiority. Jung understood that morality, when disconnected from self-awareness, becomes a tool not of growth, but control. The moral controller doesn't necessarily intend to harm. Often, they believe they're helping. They see themselves as a good influence, a protector of decency, a spiritual guide, a moral compass. But their need to be right is so overwhelming, it eclipses your need to be real. Suddenly, your authentic thoughts, emotions, or desires are treated as immature, irresponsible, low vibration. They don't attack your actions. They attack your character under the mask of wisdom. They'll say things like, "I just want the best for you. You're better than this. I don't judge you. I just worry." This isn't in alignment with who you really are. At first, it feels nurturing, like they're guiding you toward a better version of yourself. But over time, you feel smaller, less spontaneous, more cautious. You start second-guessing your intuition, editing your thoughts, avoiding certain topics, because deep down, you don't want to be morally disapproved of. And that's the power of this archetype. They don't make you fear punishment. They make you fear disappointment. Jung taught that each person constructs a persona, a mask they wear to navigate the world. But for the moral controller, that mask isn't just protection, it's their entire identity. They confuse who they truly are with the image they've created. The wise one, the healer, the disciplined one, the righteous one. And because they've buried their shadow, their impulses, flaws, and desires, they project those things onto others. Your anger becomes aggression. Your self-trust becomes rebellion. Your sexuality becomes impurity. Your freedom becomes irresponsibility. All because your truth threatens their illusion. Here's what most don't realize. The moral controller isn't powerful. They're afraid. Afraid of their own impulses, afraid of failure, afraid of chaos, afraid that if they don't control others, they'll be swallowed by the parts of themselves they've tried to erase. Their moral superiority is a defense mechanism. Their spiritual purity is often a prison. And like all unconscious archetypes, they're projecting what they've repressed. Jung put it this way: every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol or morphine or idealism. Yes, idealism. The addiction to being seen as good, to being seen as right, to being seen as evolved, superior, awakened, or morally correct. It feels noble, but it's still ego. Spending time with a moral controller is like being on trial all the time. Every word is scrutinized, every joke is dissected, every opinion is measured. You're not allowed to be unsure, sarcastic, emotional, or raw. You must be correct, humble, ethical, in alignment, even if it means lying to yourself. Their unspoken message: if you were more enlightened, you wouldn't feel that way. If you were more disciplined, you wouldn't want that. If you were more evolved, You wouldn't need that. And so you suppress your truth just to keep their approval. But what you don't realize is you're slowly abandoning yourself. To reclaim your truth, you must ask, am I allowed to be messy around this person? Do I feel like I must impress them spiritually or intellectually? Do I feel more judged than supported in their presence? Do I feel free or policed? And here's the twist Jung would want you to consider. Where might you be the moral controller? Do you overcorrect others in the name of helping? Do you believe you know what's best for everyone? Do you withhold affection to teach a lesson? Do you shame yourself for having natural human feelings? Remember, morality without awareness is just another cage. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be a saint. You just need to be real. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who others expect, not who society rewards, not who the moral controller demands." In the next part, we meet a far more chaotic figure, someone not driven by ethics or discipline, but by wounded chaos itself. Get ready to meet the complex individual, the person ruled not by ideals, but by unresolved psychic trauma that infects everyone around them. If you've ever wondered why some people trigger storms wherever they go, Part 5 will reveal the answer. We'll see you there. Some people carry their trauma like a wound, others wear it like armor. But there is a third kind. The person who becomes their trauma, who fuses so deeply with their unresolved suffering that it warps their reality. And yours. Carl Jung called this person complexed, not just because they're complicated, but because their psychological complexes have taken over their identity. They are not whole. They are fragmented. And every interaction with them feels like a battle between you and the ghosts that live inside them. Jung defines a complex as an autonomous cluster of emotions, thoughts, and memories, often formed around traumatic events or repressed experiences, which live in the unconscious, but behave like independent personalities within the psyche. Imagine a person has a trauma from childhood, maybe abandonment. That wound wasn't healed. It was buried. Over time, it grew into a complex. And now, every time someone doesn't text them back, every time plans change, every time you get distracted or show independence, that old wound wakes up, takes control, and possesses them. This is not just overreaction. This is possession by the complex. The complexed individual often seems unpredictable, but if you look closely, a pattern emerges. They interpret neutral events as personal attacks. They react emotionally to situations that don't warrant it. They twist your words, rewrite history, and reshape facts to feed their internal narrative. And that narrative always sounds like, people leave me. No one ever truly understands me. I'm always the victim. The world is against me. Being close to them feels like walking through a psychological minefield. You tiptoe around their sensitivities. You censor yourself. You become the caretaker of their nervous system. And slowly, you disappear. One of the most dangerous expressions of this archetype is the victim identity. Now let's be clear. People are hurt. People are abused. People experience real trauma. Victimization is real. But Jung warned us. If you cling to your trauma as a badge of identity, if your entire worldview is filtered through what happened to you, then you are no longer healing. You are living in fusion with your pain. You are no longer you. You are your complex. This is what he meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The complexed individual calls their suffering fate, but it's not fate. It's unprocessed pain, masquerading as personality. Complex individuals are rarely just self-contained storms. They pull people in. Why? Because the unconscious seeks integration. They attract empaths, rescuers, and healers. They unconsciously recreate their trauma by provoking the same dynamics that originally caused it. They accuse, they withdraw, they sabotage. They test love, loyalty, and patience. They say, prove you care, prove you won't leave, prove you're different. And no matter how much you give, it's never enough. Because what they really want is someone to fix what only they can heal. Jung's teachings were never about those people over there. They were about you, me, all of us. Because we all have complexes. The question is, are they running us? Ask yourself, do I overreact emotionally to certain triggers? Do I blame others for how I feel inside? Do I secretly replay stories of being hurt, abandoned, or betrayed, and find comfort in those stories? Do I require others to make up for what someone else did to me? If the answer is yes, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of buried pain. And that pain must be brought into the light. Not judged, not shamed, but integrated. So how do you protect your peace? Don't absorb their distortion. Their pain is real, but their projections are not truth. Do not internalize their chaos. Set firm emotional boundaries. You are not their therapist. You are not their healer. You are a mirror, and mirrors are not punching bags. Refuse to be recruited into their narrative. Don't play the role of the savior. Don't play the role of the villain. Play the role of the witness and step away when necessary. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The complex individual is living in that darkness, and they are terrified to look at it. You don't need to fight them. You don't need to fix them. You only need to see clearly and choose yourself. In the final part of this series, we explore the most parasitic archetype of all, the psychic vampire, the person who drains your spirit not through trauma or morality or charm, but through an insatiable hunger for your life force. Be prepared. They are everywhere. We'll meet them in part 6. You've felt it. You walk into a room, and one person instantly drains you without saying a word. You leave the conversation feeling dizzy, tired, foggy, not because of what was said, but because of what was taken. Carl Jung didn't use the term psychic vampire, but the pattern he observed across myths, dreams, and therapy rooms perfectly mirrors what we now understand as energy parasitism. This is the final archetype in our journey. The psychic vampire. They don't manipulate with charm. They don't guilt you with morality. They don't shout, accuse, or demand. They feed, quietly, consistently, ruthlessly. And unless you become aware, you'll think it's your fault you're always tired, anxious, confused, when it's not. A psychic vampire is someone who lacks an internal source of vitality. Their emotional world is barren. Their sense of self is hollow. So what do? They hook themselves into others and draw life force through interaction. Sometimes this is unconscious. They don't know they're doing it, but the result is always the same. You feel smaller, they feel stronger, and you leave wondering, what just happened to me? Psychic vampires feed in many forms. Here are the most common. 1. Constant negativity. They always have a problem, a complaint, a crisis. You become their emotional garbage bin. 2. Playing the helpless victim. They never take responsibility. You are cast as the savior, until your soul is drained and they blame you for their collapse. 3. Guilt tripping and passive aggression. They don't ask directly. They use sighs, silence, vague hints, so you feel bad and offer your energy without being asked. 4. One-sided conversations. They talk, you listen, you support, they dump, and when you finally speak, they're already looking at their phone. Sound familiar? You may not realize it during the moment, but after, you feel fatigued, even if the conversation was short. You feel confused about your own needs or opinions. You feel guilty for setting boundaries. You feel an invisible pull to go back and fix things, even though you did nothing wrong. This is no accident. Psychic vampires thrive by entangling you. They confuse you, blur your boundaries, and create dependency. Carl Jung might not have used the label, but he understood the root cause. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. The psychic vampire avoids their soul by plugging into yours. Jung would likely say, their shadow is unintegrated. Their inner child is starved. Their persona is a mask over an empty room. And the longer they avoid their inner work, the more they seek others to do it for them, energetically. If you attract these people, it's not because you're weak, it's likely because you are. Empathic, generous. A good listener. Spiritually open, emotionally intelligent. They don't want your opinion. They want your essence. They feel safe with you, but not for the reason you'd hope. They feel safe because they know you'll give, even when it costs you. 1. Recognize the pattern. Awareness is power. The moment you see the feeding, the spell begins to break. 2. Use minimal engagement. Gray rock, flat tone, brief replies. The less energy you give, the less they feed. 3. Cut energetic cords. After intense interactions, sit in silence. Visualize their energy detaching. Say to yourself, what's theirs returns to them, what's mine returns to me. 4. Protect your light. You are not here to save everyone. You are not selfish for resting. You are not cruel for walking away. Boundaries are not barriers. They are filters. They let love in and keep parasites out. Carl Jung taught us that the greatest danger is not what we see, but what remains unseen. These 6 dangerous archetypes, the unconscious manipulator, the persona bearer, the shadow projector, the moral controller, the complex individual, and the psychic vampire. They all operate from the same source, unconsciousness. Your power lies not in fighting them, but in seeing clearly, staying grounded, and choosing who gets access to your mind and heart. You don't need to hate them. You don't need to diagnose them. You simply need to protect your peace, because someone has to, and it must be you.